Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being on our program. I'm Armando F. Sanchez, and today we have a honored guest on our program, columnist, author, writer, dreamer, and someone that goes into the community and shows us the need to fight for a struggle, to fight for the community. Randy Jurado Ertll is an award-winning published author, educator, and newspaper columnist. He has also served as executive director for well-established, prominent nonprofit organizations. Ertl served as the communication director for the Congressional member on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. He has published numerous opinion columns in newspapers and magazines such as Los Angeles Times, USA Today, La Opinión, Daily News, La Prensa, on and on and on and on and on. And he has also been interviewed by networks such as NPR, CNN, PBS, Univisión, and Telemundo. He's won many awards. He went to Occidental College, known for their writing abilities and skills, and also to Azusa Pacific University. I can't tell you how really honored I have to have Randy on the show, and we're going to talk also about his book here, In the Struggles Chronicles. Randy, thank you for being on the program.
Yeah, thank you, Armando. I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be on your show. I was really looking forward to it. So thank you. And it took a little while, but we're finally here.
Yeah.
Yes. Al fin.
Al fin. Thelma T. Reina also, she also does Foothills Press and Golden Foothills Press. And she was the one who told me about you. And she says, Armando, you just got to hear his story. So I was just anxious to hear and meet with you today. Randy, what would you say is your common theme in your books, including In the Struggle Chronicles?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I have it here too. Like In the Struggle Chronicles, I mean, it's sometimes students or people ask me, how long did it take you to write your books? And it goes from a couple of months to like 2-3 months to 6 months to this one that took me literally 20 years. So when I tell young kids, they can't believe me. And then I'm like, yeah, 20 years, that's not a long time. And then I tell them, my friend, it took him like 40 years to write his book. And that's really true. It took, Victor Villaseñor, when he wrote Reign of Gold, it took him 40 years. So I'm like, 20 years is half of that. So, so it could be a couple of months, or it could be 20 years, 40 years. Sometimes it takes people 50 years, depending on what inspires them or what process they use.
What inspires you?
Yes. So to me, it was a way to chronicle our struggles and our history and our political movements. Like I would say from the 90s till the present. So in a way, so that certain events and situations and social movements or individuals wouldn't be forgotten. Because time does tend to forget people. And I used to, when I would give presentations, I would tell students or people like, okay, how long does it take for people to forget when something happened? And of course, sometimes it could be yesterday, but it usually takes 100 years. Like in every 100 years, people forget. And I think just by coincidence, that's exactly what happened with the pandemic, like COVID-19, that people forgot that there was the Blue Death or the Blue plague in 1910, 1911. Like, or I see. I even forgot the exact years, but it happened over like 100 years ago, and that's why we had forgotten. And then COVID-19 made us revisit the past, like that 100 years ago. People were going through this same struggles that
the Spanish flu.
Yes, and they had to wear masks, and millions of people died. So I think that that's why it's essential to have literature so that we won't forget what happened 100 years or more or less.
You know, I've heard the statement that writers, especially persons like you who write columns and etc., you're sort of the lighthouses you point out things that are today, and then when you capture our attention, then you remind us how this is connected to history, that it isn't just a solitary thing. Did you sort of see yourself as sort of that lighthouse and trying to tell people, look for these things, it's going to impact your life?
Yeah, it can be like lonely as that lighthouse, because usually they're like out somewhere in the ocean, by the ocean, in the sea, in the dark, right? And I think that they're easy to ignore or to not pay attention to. And I think writers have that struggle or that challenge that people, you could be writing about something, but people may not want to uh, admit it or hear it or see it. And because sometimes as a writer, you write the truth. And I think sometimes it is too harsh for people to process or to admit. So, um, what I've written stuff because even last night, just by coincidence, I was just having random thoughts or memories, and I was remembering, and I'm like, I think I've gotten a few mayors upset, and I was like, I got Mayor Reardon pissed off at me, where he went off like at a press conference because I said that he wasn't paying attention to the poor people in like central LA. And then I was like, I pissed off Mayor Villaraigosa because I said he didn't hire enough Central Americans. And then I was like, oh, and I got the mayor of Pasadena upset. So I was like, wow, okay, I've been like getting people upset. And I think that sometimes writing and telling the truth creates a lot of anger at that moment because people don't want to admit it, even though it is occurring. And I think that in hindsight, what I was saying wasn't anything negative or it wasn't like personal attacks. It was more like an observation. And I think now I get to laugh at it, but I remember I was like a little like concerned, that they were getting upset at me, and then they were calling me out by my first name, and I was like, whoa, yeah, exactly, because I didn't want to just be creating controversy just because, I think I was trying to do it in a responsible way, and I think through writing I would um, unintentionally get people upset. It wasn't like I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write this to get people upset at me. And I think that it's been a long like journey or lesson that there are there are prices to pay. It's a big price if you're like a serious writer, and you pay a big price because people get upset and they may not want to forget.
Let me see if I understand this. So, if people are reacting of this caliber, policymakers at well-known policymakers, isn't this sort of in an indirect award of your writing abilities, that you have the ability to trigger thought, to change, influence policy?
I think so. I think it has hopefully has a ripple effect that it may change policy. But politicians can have vendettas or grudges against people because they want people to mainly say positive things about them. And that's what I've learned about human nature and elected officials, that they want people to be very flattering. And I think they get used to that. So if you um, call them on things like I did with even including W. Bush, I wrote columns that I would call him on immigration issues and other issues. Um, they take it very seriously because you start to impact thousands of people, or if not millions of people, because of the public opinion impact. And I think that's why they get upset at that moment. And some, I think, are mature enough or professional enough to understand that, but others may not. They may take it personal, and they may not understand that that's the role of a writer, to
Yeah.
expose certain things and to make people think. And I think that's why I blame Occidental College to some extent, because Oxy teaches us to be um, activists at heart and by nature, and I think that a lot of people like Ernesto Galarza, he was a precursor of the Chicano movement and of the he influenced, and he hasn't gotten a lot of attention because he was in the 40s, 50s writing about migrant workers and farm workers. But that's where a lot of people got their ideas from. But they don't give him credit because time has forgotten him. Like, I mean, people don't read Barrio Boy or I forgot the other title of his other book, but Barrio Boy is very good. It was about his experience of growing up in Sacramento, well, immigrating with his mom and growing up in Sacramento. And then he describes in the book how his mom dies when he's a kid because of an illness and how he had to struggle. But then he became very powerful intellect, and because he got his undergraduate degree at Oxy a long time ago. I mean, I forget the exact year. I will Google it, and then he got his PhD at Stanford, I think. So he became a really uh, powerful advocate in policy and in writing, and I'm sure he got people upset during that time. But we don't know because a lot of it hasn't been documented. But I think that other people that time has forgotten. It's I forgot her first name, but her last name is Moreno. I think it's Maria Moreno, who was before Cesar Chavez and before Dolores Huerta. And a documentary that was done a few years ago, just a couple of years ago, actually did justice to her because she was organizing in the 50s. She was organizing the farm workers in California, and she was a very powerful lady. It's just that they didn't like her because she spoke the truth and she was very feisty. And even Cesar wrote a letter, like that they show in the documentary that he said, "Oh, she's running her mouth, blah blah blah." So he didn't particularly like her. So I think that's the role of people who write or who chronicle history through documentaries or movies or theater plays. So there is that there's the accepted history versus the hidden history that people don't want to be known. And I think that I took the role. I wanted to take the role of writing contemporary issues that were really occurring at that time, and then through each year I was able to kind of like page by page I put it in chronological order of what was happening in that year so that people wouldn't forget. But it's interesting to have been there.
And I honor you that you did it both in English and in Spanish, and persons have the option of. So you're buying two books actually at the same time.
Yes.
Given what you know now, and given what you've experienced now as a writer, you ruffle feathers many a times. Do you think you would go back and say, "Gee, I shouldn't have done that. I should have been more low key, or I shouldn't have written that"? Or did you say to yourself, I need to continue this?
That the latter. Yeah, I told myself and I convinced myself that I needed to continue doing it. And yeah, I didn't get like the big bureaucratic positions, and the big like yeah, sir, because that's a price that you pay. Because if you piss off a mayor, they're not gonna appoint you to anything, or you're not gonna get hired or this or that, because that's the problem with politics, that it's very transactional. You give me money for my campaign, or you say great things about me, and then the favors are returned. And that's why a lot of times the social justice doesn't occur or get implemented, because it's more like superficial stuff. And so to me, it was like a conscious decision that I made that I would continue writing what I felt was, I would say, objective and opinionated, because that's what gives sabor to the columns. If you're an opinion writer, that's why they're called opinions, because it's your opinion. And then I learned that we're all entitled to our opinion, and that's the fundamental thing about the First Amendment and the U.S. Constitution. That's what we fought for, right? To have freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. And I think that the recent challenges have tested that fundamental right, because a lot of times uh, people started, even now it's occurring where people are censoring each other because it's gotten out of hand, like the political rhetoric. And to me, in my writing, I always wanted it to be somewhat balanced, but also very opinionated, to say the truth, or my truth, because people sometimes interpret their truth in different ways. But I wanted to put it out there in a way of creating a voice. Yeah, for example, because most of the time, the Black and Latino kids from South LA never had a voice, and we didn't have a platform like in the 80s, 90s, especially before the internet. So I wanted to revisit and do justice to a lot of the kids, like young people who were murdered or who joined gangs and died in the process. And I wanted to tell their stories and also talk about the dynamics of the LAPD, LAUSD, and I did. I touched on a lot of those things because I felt that it was important to say what was happening and what role these institutions played. And so, yeah, I think I took the approach that I would stick to what I've written. But I know that uh, that people, even like when I dealt with the other people too, they're elected officials, even like the presidential candidates in Salvador, a lot of times I knew that they weren't doing the right thing, and I would write about it. Like, for example, I wrote about the corruption that was taking place within the political parties over there and how they were stealing money, but it hadn't been proven yet. It was more like hearsay. Uh, and then all of them got prosecuted slowly but surely. They all got prosecuted for stealing tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So I talked about how they were taking advantage of the young people that were coming from El Salvador to participate in the Rose Parade. And they were raising all this money, but then where was the money going? And then I was like, that's interesting. So then I wrote that like years ago, like 5, 10 years ago. And then last year or 2 years ago, well, a year ago before COVID-19, then it came out where a young man was the whistleblower. He pretty much exposed the shenanigans that were occurring. So I pissed off people like 10 years ago when I wrote about that. They were like really upset and angry. And even this lady who was on the school board, she didn't want to talk to me. Yeah, so yeah, that happens because they take it the wrong way. They take it personal. And I think that they don't understand that the role of a writer is to be as truthful as possible, and it's very difficult because people don't want you to to say the truth, really.
Randy, we share something in common. I was raised in Mexico when I was a young kid, till I was 11, and then I came back to the United States. And you are a native. You lived a few years in El Salvador, and I know you keep with the politics down there. But I don't want to talk about those two countries. I want to talk about Latin America, but at the same time, I'm talking global. I think the idea is that you and I have had experience of living in countries where free speech is not available. And you hear about the writers in Mexico being murdered constantly for writing columns, and I'm sure as you go further south in Mexico, in Latin America, it gets worse. And this is true in many countries of the Soviet bloc and other parts of the world. We haven't gotten to that stage, at least I hope not, here in the United States, but we have experience being in countries where free speech is not available. It scares the heck out of me to think that that would be duplicated here, that would be brought up here also.
Yes, and it is possible if we're not careful of ending up in similar situations that have occurred in other countries, like Soviet Union, China, and we see what happens with the people who speak up there. Even recent issues, they get put in prison, they get put in jail. So I think that here, this was a litmus test just recently whether we were going to go in that direction, and we're still like struggling. We're like kind of like fighting as a country, and that's why the last book that I wrote, it's a novel I titled The Race Wars, because I wanted to talk about race issues and also COVID-19 and other issues too. So I write nonfiction and fiction, and then I felt that other times you could say the truth through fiction because people will enjoy it more. And what's amazing is that it starts to imitate reality. Fiction imitates reality. And that's what was incredible, that I created this character in one of my novels, The Life and Times of El Cipitillo. And what was interesting is that the outrageous things that he did in the novel to become president were like not that outrageous with all the recent.
Now it seems almost real, huh?
Yes, some of it actually became real. Some of the experiences or descriptions that I wrote in the different chapters, and that's what was shocking to me, that I never imagined that things that I was exaggerating about in a fictional way became real. So I think that's what it liberated me about becoming, not just being a nonfiction writer or just writing columns, but also like to write fiction, because once I found out that you can there's no rules in fiction, it was liberating for me, because you could pretty much write anything that you want. And I'm like, why not? Like, because white writers, they get to write whatever they want. But what's interesting to me is that for some reason there's rules that are applied to us, as Latinos, where they say, oh, you can't write about that. And then I'm like, why not? Why can't we? I mean, we have a right to express ourselves too.
Absolutely. Randy, before we go on to the next question, could you please provide for our listeners and our viewers the webpage where people can follow you with your ongoing publications and hopefully many of your future ones?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I have my website is www.randyjuradoertll.com, and it's right there, like right here. I'll just put it in. Okay. So it's right there. Sure. And they could get more information through my website, or other social media.
Type in your name and it'll pop up everywhere in social media. You've written enough articles across the board, and I congratulate you with that. I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here. Where is your mind thinking about writing into the future? What do you see the coming issue status?
Yes, good question, because I'll just do a little show and tell, because I wanted to do the Adventures of El Cipitillo, Las Aventuras del Cipitillo, and this is for like young people, for kids, so that they could have fun reading in English and Spanish, and so that I could create a little superhero for them. And this is like the feel good one. and I wanted to have something, for kids, because like the serious books, my nonfiction ones and my fiction books are more for adults, more for young adults, because como en The Life and Times of El Cipitillo, La vida y los tiempos del Cipitillo, es bien malcriado, like Luis said, malcriado. I mean, and then La Ciguanaba and the Magical Loroco, that's a pretty powerful novel where I make a female superhero, and I touch on taboos where she becomes the first female priest, and then she becomes the first female pope. And so I'm like, why not?
Sure.
Because there should be gender equality. This is the Spanish version, La Ciguanaba y el Oroco Mágico, and this is Race Wars El Cadejo. So with this, I completed the trilogy, and then I was like, okay, finally. So now I'm at the stage where I'm taking a break in terms of like letting my imagination or my thoughts naturally lead me to the next project or book that I'm going to do, because that's how I like it, for it to occur, for it to just occur naturally. Let's say when I'm driving or when I'm walking, or even as we're speaking, I may think of something, and that's how it comes to me. It comes to me in a very unplanned way, and that's how I like to be as a writer. Just write what inspires me, and I think that's the key. You have to be inspired and motivated. Like even in the Spanish literature of like a long time ago, con Unamuno and Federico Garcia Lorca, they talked about el duende, which is like a concept of inspiration. You have to have the inspiration of el duende. So I think that has to come to you somehow, and I think that's what will occur, with the next one.
So you leave yourself open to all experiences until something strikes, your real creative juices start flowing, and then it seems to me you're just, after that, you're addicted to writing.
Yes, and that's sort of like what I did, or what I still do with the columns. They have to come to me. Like the last one I wrote, because I haven't written that many because of COVID-19, because it's hard to be inspired or motivated, and it is. But it was one a couple of months ago about how our nation is divided by race and other issues, and economics too. And I wrote about Biden and Trump and the debate they had. And it was more like an analysis that we needed a leader that could heal our country and unite us, because I think that's what we need now. And I think that hopefully that will occur, because I think that's what keeps our country together. Someone that can bring Black, Latino, Asian, white, all races, nationalities together, to find the differences. I think it's good to acknowledge the differences, but then get to the similarities. Because first we have to acknowledge that we may have certain differences, but then again, the differences is what may unite us. It's like a little backwards, right? Because people usually say, "Oh, we have to find what's in common or our similarities," but sometimes some humans have nothing, or almost not nothing, but a lot that they don't have in common because of their life experiences. And our country is segregated. It really is. Like, for example, like when we initially started talking, I was able to escape South LA, and I grew up mainly with Black and Latino, and I actually learned English with the Black community. So I used to talk very Black. I used to say ain't, and I can still talk if I want to, because I can code switch depending on what community I'm in, because I grew up in that community. But then I can also talk como Chicanos, because I grew up with Chicanos too. So people probably think, how am I able to create these characters that speak that way? But it's because I lived it. So when I went to high school in Rochester, Minnesota, I got to know white people. And then I got to know them as humans and not just as a race or white. And I think that really made a difference in my point of view and in my perspective. Because I met a few evil ones, but most that I met were nice. They never attacked me or hurt me. I mean, but Minnesota is the nice, that's one of the phrases that describes Minnesota. Everybody's nice, and I think that's part of the culture there, to be nice and polite. But if you go to Alabama, Georgia, and if you're black or Latino immigrant, you could get beaten or killed because a lot of the stuff that occurred in the past in the South is still happening, and we've seen it. We saw it, with George Floyd, and today the Attorney General, I think I saw the headline, found that police officer that killed the black gentleman just for holding a cell phone, killed him right away, like in a few seconds once they arrived in the garage. They found him guilty. So I think that our nation is changing, where we're starting to finally come to grips that it's not acceptable to kill people that are not doing anything really horrendous, and they don't have a gun, they're not shooting at the officers. So, and we've seen it on video, and I think that's something that's very powerful. And I think technology with smartphones now have given us that evidence. Before it was more like what was written or said on TV, and that's what we believed. But now I think with our smartphones, we could record any injustice that we see. And I think before it was more like columnist, where you had to write it, just like the role that Ruben Salazar played, and he paid a high price because he evolved. The title of the documentary was Man in the Middle, right? Because he was very conservative. I think he may have been Republican. He lived in Orange County, married a white lady, and then the LA Times loved him because he was a company man. And so he was very así, pues, bien portado. And then when he came back from reporting in Mexico and he was here, he got to see the Chicano movement firsthand. He evolved, and he decided to join his community and to give a voice. But then people got upset, like, oh boy, like, yeah, the sheriff's department did not like his columns. Yep, and then we know the tragic incident that occurred. So I think that to bring it in perspective, it's not that easy. It could be like a lot of pressure. Yeah, because if you become a committed writer, yeah, that's where it gets very serious. But I think that you have to be, if you want to be like como pues un escritor pues con ganas y fuerza, pues you gotta say it, write it.
You have to be truthful to yourself if that's what you're going to be as a writer.
Yes, and it's a process. It's a process, and I think that sometimes some people start off revolucionarios y terminan tranquilos y calmados, ¿verdad? Porque it's a natural process of life. Como que once you hit 50, you start becoming
more conservative.
Yeah, sí, más conservative, más calmado. Pero, or some people start off that way, like conservative because of the way the family was or how they grew up, especially if they grew up in a household with a mom or dad that was a police officer. Their point of view is very different, conservative, and they're really pro that. But then they start like that. And then once they go to a college or university, depending which one they go to, let's say they go to Berkeley, then they become revolucionario. And some stay that way, some stay very consistent. That's why I admire. I know people like to attack her, and I don't like how they attack Dolores Huerta because she's a older lady. You know, she's 90 now. But I saw some YouTube videos, and some people were just being harsh with her because she supports the Democratic Party. And so what if she does? You know, that's her prerogative. That's her right. And you know, like just how people attack Republicans, but then I don't think it's fair. And I saw the documentaries too, how they would attack her in the 60s and 70s, and they used to attack her because of her personal life. And I was like, what is that about? You know, why are you attacking her because she has a lot of children? That doesn't mean that that there's anything wrong with that. But they would like make it personal, and they were attacking a lady that was very committed.
I think what I'm learning from you is through this interview is that if you're making changes, whether it be through your voice, through your writing, through documentaries, etc., you're going to catch flack from people because you're
Yes.
stimulating change. And you know, as strange as it sounds, even today, people don't want change. People want to stay the status quo. And obviously, you as a columnist and all your great perspectives doesn't allow you to be a status quo. You're constantly trying to better, better society, better for everyone. So I applaud that for you. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I have two things from you that I'm going to request. Could you please one more time mention your website and
yes.
your closing statements, por favor?
Sí, it's www. Randy Jurado Ertll is Randy, and then JURADO, and then ERTLL.com. Y pueden buscar mis libros. You can check out my books on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Apple Books, indiebound.org. Así que now there's more access through literature because of the internet.
Okay, your closing statements.
Because I was just getting warmed up.
Never interview a columnist because he's just barely getting warmed up.
Hey, I thought this was the intro. I was like, okay, first paragraph. I thought this was the first.
Dude, there's an end to the book. There's got to be an end. The end back here.
No puede terminar.
No, you got to, dude. You got to.
But yeah, and then I'll go to the middle, and then I'll go to
no. Get to it.
Al grano, right? Okay. No, I think that it's important to write our stories and to create our own voice and to be authentic to ourselves and to the community. And some people may like you, some people may not, but then you got to keep going because if you listen to the naysayers and the haters, then you're not going to make changes. So you just got to keep believing in yourself, because if I were to listen to the people who don't like me or who doubt me, then I wouldn't be like forging my own path or making changes that I feel are important, because a lot of times that occurs. I think that's where I was getting at with just what they did to Maria Moreno, what they were doing to Dolores Huerta, what they did to Archbishop Romero. I think a lot of times when you're speaking up, they want to silence you. And I think my message is not to allow anyone to silence you, because our voice, it's a gift. It's a gift, And I think that also Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, especially Maya Angelou, expressed how her voice was taken away from her when she was abused as a child. She didn't speak for many years because she was traumatized. And then she finally liberated herself through poetry and the written word. And I think that's what it does for me. it liberates me. And I think that's my role as a writer, to liberate myself, but to liberate others too. Mhm.
Well, I'm going to keep it constant with the idea of a lighthouse. I can think of one lighthouse down in South America, in the Cape. And even though the light is very bright, they still talk about all the ships that went shipwrecked anyway. They just did not pay attention to the light. And I walk away with that idea, talking to you, that you're beaming light on an issue, on a problem, telling us the future, that if we don't be careful, it's going to happen, or something can happen. And yet people ignore it. People ignore the stories. But thanks to people like yourself and your books and your adventures to tell everyone, you're actually reminding us that if we're going to be free, we're going to have to be thinkers. We're going to have to be critical thinkers, especially what we experience. COVID will pass, but we cannot allow it to forget. There are still other diseases. Did we already forget we had Ebola? I thought that one was going to break out. This pandemic was just bad, but if Ebola had broken out of Africa, that's scary. So
yes,
Randy, thank you very much for being a guest on our show. I look forward to having you on future programs. So, we have to do another one in Spanish, if you don't mind.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll schedule that in.
Yeah, and gracias to Telma Reina, for telling you about me, and then thank you for having me on your show. I really enjoyed it. Y me estaba portando bien, I was like, I was being
okay. Okay, we're going to have a show where you do not behave. And let's see where
exactly.
that one goes.
En español, ahí
There you go. We'll go with that one. One from El Salvador and one from Mexico. We'll see where that goes. Oh, my God.
We'll merge it. Merge the two cultures.
There you go, Randy. Randy, be safe. And as a friend of mine says up in Canada, stay negative. When she said that, I didn't understand it. And then it dawned on me. Stay negative. Don't catch the COVID, and to health to your family and everyone else. Keep writing, and let's get back to doing another show in Spanish.
Okay, gracias, Armando.
Okay, adios.
Nos vemos. Okay, gracias.